After months of tense negotiations between Democrats and Republicans, U.S. President Joe Biden on Saturday signed the debt ceiling bill, suspending the U.S. government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling and averting what within days would have been a first-ever government default. A video of Biden signing the bill appeared on the president's Twitter account, and the White House, in a statement, thanked top Senate and House leaders from both parties. The bill's signing came a day after Biden hailed it as a bipartisan triumph in his first-ever Oval Office address to the nation as president.
There were extreme voices threatening to take America for the first time in our 247-year history into default on our national debt. Nothing would have been more irresponsible. No one got everything they wanted, but the American people got what they needed.
Both parties cobbled together an 11th-hour deal that suspends the debt limit until January 2025 and caps spending, and it passed through the Senate and the House this week. In the end, Republicans won about $1.5 trillion in spending reductions over 10 years, which may or may not be fully realized. Their opening bid was for $4.8 trillion in savings over a decade. Both parties walled off the sprawling Social Security and Medicare retirement and health care programs from cuts. Despite the Treasury meeting its debt obligations, the possibility of another U.S. credit rating downgrade is still on the table. Fitch Ratings on Friday said the United States AAA rating remains on negative watch. It cited repeated political standoffs and last-minute suspensions for, quote, lowering confidence in governance on fiscal and debt matters. A senior U.S. State Department official will travel to China next week as Washington seeks to boost communication with Beijing at a time of tense relations between the two countries. The announcement of the visit came Saturday, just hours after U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, speaking in Singapore at Asia's top security summit, blasted China for refusing to hold military talks over territorial disputes in the South China Sea.
I am deeply concerned that the PRC has been unwilling to engage more seriously on better mechanisms for crisis management between our two militaries.
A senior Chinese military official struck back at Austin, saying the U.S. was responsible for a breakdown in dialogue by ramping up sanctions on Chinese officials and destabilizing the Asia-Pacific region with its military presence. Ties between the world's two largest economies are at loggerheads over everything from the future of democratically ruled Taiwan, territorial claims in the South China Sea, and President Joe Biden's restrictions on semiconductor chip exports. For its latest diplomatic effort, the U.S. will send Daniel Crittenbrink, the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, to China to discuss what the State Department called, quote, key issues in the bilateral relationship. Crittenbrink's trip follows a visit to China last month by CIA Director William Burns. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken postponed a planned February trip to China after an alleged Chinese spy balloon flew through U.S. airspace over sensitive military sites, kicking off a diplomatic crisis.
As workers clear up the remaining wrecked trains, preliminary investigations are pointing to a signal failure as the likely cause of the crash that killed hundreds of people in India's worst train disaster in decades and wounded over 1,000 more. Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw was at the scene on Sunday.
The issue is about the point machine and electronic interlocking. The change in the electronic interlocking caused this accident, and whoever did it, and whatever the reasons, will be known after the investigation.
According to a preliminary investigation, one passenger train, the Coromandel Express, heading to Chennai from Kolkata, moved out of the main track and entered what's called a loop track, which is used to park trains. At about 80 miles per hour, it crashed into a parked freight train doing so. That crash caused the train to jump the tracks, topple and hit another train heading in the opposite direction and at about the same speed, according to a member of the railway board. The drivers of both passenger trains were injured but survived. Indian authorities say they have now concluded rescue operations. At a business center where bodies were being taken for identification, dozens of relatives waited, many weeping and clutching identification cards and pictures of missing loved ones. Seema Chowdhury's husband was going to the city of Chennai to work on the evening of the crash. She is still looking for him at the center.
I have been to all the hospitals and have found out nothing. Now I'm going to Bhubaneswar to find out. I just need my husband. I don't want anything else.
Families of the dead will get 1 million rupees or about $12,000 in compensation, while the seriously injured will get 200,000 rupees with 50,000 rupees for minor injuries.
Reuters sources have revealed that senior officials from about 24 of the world's top intelligence agencies have been meeting in secret in Singapore for years, including representatives from both the US and China, meetings which have never before been made public, and there are few details known of what's being discussed. That's according to 5 sources, all anonymous due to the sensitivity. The meetings are said to happen on the fringes of a security summit called the Shangri-La Dialogue, which was just recently held this year, named for the Shangri-La Hotel. The summit hosts many world leaders and officials, but the spy chiefs have been going to a separate venue, organized by the Singapore government. This year, the US was represented by the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. It's not clear who represents China, but its presence there comes despite the many problems between it and US allies. It's also said that the head of India's overseas intelligence agency, Sumant Goel, attended. Russia did not attend this year, but the war in Ukraine was discussed at one point. International crime was also discussed. There were few other specifics. One source said that the meetings are an important fixture of what they call the, quote, international shadow agenda, and that there's an unspoken code among intelligence services that they can talk to each other, even when more open and formal diplomacy is more difficult. The atmosphere is said to be collaborative and cooperative, not combatant. Large intelligence meetings like this between powers involving opposing ideologies are extremely rare and almost never publicized.